consequences of what we find?
I think that's a bigger question about the evaluation as a whole than about the specific performance measures, but I think it's a really important question when you go into it before you even think of evaluating. So why are you doing this, and what are you going to do with the results? If the purpose of an evaluation, excuse me, is for PR and marketing purposes, then that's very different than if you're going in with an open mind and you really want to know, is this program meeting its needs? It may be, for example, especially in a 10-year-old program, that so much has changed in the external world that where it might have been relevant and absolutely on target a decade ago, things have changed so much in terms of how education is delivered, who the teachers are. I can think of a million different contextual factors. That the information is that, you know what, at this point in time, it's not meeting the point. And if your goal is not just to continue getting funding from your funders, be it the Federation or anybody else, but rather to deliver the most relevant and appropriate professional development, then you have to look at this as a gift. And in reporting it, and we'll talk a little bit about reporting later, in reporting it, you have to put the most positive spin, which I think is the right one, going back to Stufflebeam, that the purpose is to improve, not to prove. If it was just to prove, then you would be doing a marketing study and come up with PR. If the idea is to really ask the hard questions about, is this the right thing, and are we doing it well and right, then you're going to ask different questions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so that's a perfect, and I need to thank you, because that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to put out in front of you, and you can, again, refer to Pathways for a very long, itemized list of questions, evaluation questions that you may want to answer, but you need to think about that. You need to think about the purpose of the evaluation. So are your questions about program planning? If so, you might ask a bunch of questions about things like, were all of the people who should have been involved in the planning? Did the planning cover everything that you need to carry out the program? For example, did it include publicity, marketing, materials, room arrangements, food, etc.? Were the program goals clearly specified? Was the program relevant to the participants' needs, wants, or interests? Did it focus on an important or a needed area? How is it the same or different from competing programs? Does it advance the interests of your institution or the community? You get the gist. And as I said, there's a long litany of these kinds of questions to think about when you're thinking about what you want your evaluation to do, and then you can figure out how you're going to go about collecting the data. Or you might be interested in getting a lot of information because you get feedback that maybe the program is not being implemented in the best way. And so you may want to ask questions about the implementation. How many people actually participated? How many came compared to how many were expected? Did you reach the people that you wanted to reach? Was it well administered? Were the facilities and the logistics actually satisfactory? Were the contents appropriate to the participants? Was the pacing good? Were the materials good? What was the cost-benefit ratio? What should be different next time? If you want to ask questions about impact, if that's what you want to know, then we covered this last time, and we'll cover it more now. But was it, do you have data that shows that you achieved your goals, that the learner outcomes were achieved? So that's about the fidelity, and then you want to look through, all of these other criteria to think about choosing performance measures. So here are the data collection instruments or performance measures. It's taken, again, from Pathways, but there's a lot of ways to gather data. Some that we normally think about right away and others that are less obvious. So a lot of times people immediately, when they think about evaluation, think about surveys. But we can also talk about tests of knowledge and skill. We can talk about self-reports, both about behaviors and feelings, and there are a number of ways to get at that, through logs, journals, people explaining critical incidents, anecdotes. Case studies are a way of collecting data. You could do portfolio assessment or do a document review of records and other documents. You could do interviews as opposed to surveys. Surveys are usually self-administered. Interviews are administered by an evaluator or a researcher, and they can be done either individually or in groups. They can be done face-to-face or by phone. Surveys could be administered on the spot, via mail, pencil and paper, online, email. There are a lot of opportunities now these days. We often, in the Jewish world, don't think enough, in the Jewish education world, don't think enough about observations. And I want to recommend this to you, that there are a lot of ways to see whether people are implementing the things that they learn through structured observations. I'll talk a little bit, I'll give an example of that. Unstructured ones, still photos, videos, where you can see what's going on. And then probably, if you're really looking at long-term change, certainly longitudinal studies are a way to go. So the whole idea of this is to broaden your view of how do you collect data to show whether or not you're achieving your goals. And I now will be turning to presenting some options, some of which you could adopt and adapt right away. Others are more complicated. I have to start with a caveat, which is that due to time limitations, this was only a relatively short 3-part webinar. My goal here is just to acquaint you with the options and make you more educated consumers and to give you some easy-to-implement tools. But if you really want to delve more deeply into this, there are more rigorous courses in evaluation in institutions of higher learning, online, and I can tell you that over the course of my education, I must have taken a minimum of a dozen courses, probably more, only focused on evaluation, survey design, analysis, etc. And so I'm not really apologizing, but this is just to whet your appetite. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to turn you all into super expert mavens, but I think you will have what to go on in order to move forward.